that he was in New York. Just as a reminder, everybody, my name is Kyle Fisher. You're listening to The Call Sports, your home for ad-free, interruption-free New York sports talk. Right now, we are wrapping up a discussion about the Mets in the postseason. Feel free to join the conversation. We can always loop back. We'll go to some Yankees. We'll be talking some Giants and Jets shortly. You can give us a call. Give us a text. Number is 917-793-1717. Make sure you're checking us out on Twitter at The Call Sports, at Kyle Fisher 45. Let me know why the Phillies stink, and I'll tell you why you're wrong, baby. I promise you. But no, I'm not somebody who likes to yell. I'm not somebody who likes to get in arguments. I like fun discussions about sports because sports are fun. So come on, join the conversation, and we can go anywhere that the fans will enjoy. Jacob holding us down. Thanks again for helping out with the technical difficulties as the show got started.
Hey, it's my pleasure, man. I'm just happy to be
now.
here with you today.
Appreciate it, man. So I do want to take a step away from. Well, I'm going to mention one thing about baseball before we move on, just because it's late in this game between Tampa and Cleveland. You're a little bit more tuned into New York talk than I am. Yankee fans, Yankee aficionados, who do they want to see? You know, the Rays, I know that they've handled both teams well this season, the Rays being a divisional opponent. Do you want to face a team that knows you that well, or do you want to face that top-end starting pitching that Cleveland has to offer?
I think you want Cleveland just because of the run that your offense has been on, but also because from a pure psychological perspective, do you want the Tampa Bay Rays, who have just found ways to kill Giants these past few seasons? It really is the second coming of Moneyball with that team. You always look at it, and it looks like a bunch of scraps. It looks like they found the dregs of the league and just put them together to say that they spent the cap money. But I every time they just find a way to pull it out. It's kind of insane. And I think that if you're the Yankees, and obviously I don't want to speak for the other team, but I imagine if you're a Yankees fan, you don't want that smoke. You don't want to think about it. You don't want to have to imagine what that team can do to you. Even if you've handled them well this year, they always seem to pull it out. And I just don't think that you want to even chance it when you know that the Cleveland Guardians, who are going to be good for a long time, I think, just because of how young they are, you want to get them while they're young, not when they can be a little more dangerous than they are now even. I would avoid Tampa Bay.
Agree. Yeah, I agree. And you know, Tampa Bay, I like the thing that you said about Moneyball. That I think every move that they make, even on paper, if you're like, what? It's going to pay off. Almost every single time, they make a move, and then 2 months from now, you're like, when did they get this guy? How's this guy a stud? And then you go back and you're like, oh, that's right. They traded their starting shortstop for 4 bullpen pieces in May, and it somehow is coming up clutch in the postseason. The one thing that I heard a long time ago, I don't know if you are a fan of the Talkin' Baseball crew. Love those guys. Been following since right before the Utley and Syndergaard's issue, the lip reading back then. We can talk about that if you want before the end, as a diehard Chase Utley fan, if you'd like. But I heard a great thing that Trevor Plouffe said a while ago on the podcast, and he said, if you are interested to see who is good in your farm system, call the Rays about a fake trade and see who they want. And then hang up the phone and promote those guys, because whoever the Rays are targeting, they're going to end up being. Now, obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it. The development that the Rays have are incredible. You know, the Dodgers have essentially copied what the Rays did, took a lot of the people from Tampa Bay to put in the front office, to put in the development group, and then they have the money to back it up, which is obviously the clear difference, right, and the clear difference between them and everybody, let alone them and the Rays. We can talk a little bit more postseason. Like I said, tied in the 10th inning right now. They potentially could be going to the bullpen, but just went to commercial. So we'll keep you in tune, see if Cleveland wins game 2, and we can start talking about how the Yankees will look. Go for it.
Before we get off baseball, I just want to pose a question for you to stew on for a little bit here until we get back to the MLB. Are the Tampa Bay Rays the Oklahoma City Thunder of baseball?
Okay, I need to know why you say that.
I mean, look at what Sam Presti is able to do with this team. I mean, I just don't. He's playing 2K in real life. He gets these guys. He takes in these contracts, these Kemba Walker contracts, the Chris Paul contracts, the Paul Georges, and he finds a way to flip them for not much in terms of talent. We know that, but all the draft picks in the world. Now he's sitting there like the godfather of the league. If you want anything in terms of a future, if you're rebuilding from a place of contention, you got to go through Oklahoma City. And yes, it's a little different in terms of they're not going out and moneyballing situation and paying low on high reward players. But you could say that they're doing the exact same thing in terms of paying low, getting everyone that they could want in terms of future stars on these rookie deals. It's kind of remarkable. I really don't know what you even do about that from a competition balancing perspective, like Adam Silver always talks about. It's just kind of flabbergasting, frankly.
So first of all, I love that comparison, and I appreciate you giving some extra context for the folks listening. But I love that comparison because you're so right. I think that they might be. Obviously, it's a little bit different in the NBA. The trades are much more frequent. You have to match salaries. There's so many more things to take into account. But when you control that many first round picks, you're essentially going to be a part of every single conversation as the third man. As the team that could potentially get something done, and it's a great way to potentially build through trades through the draft. We're gonna take a side tangent here for a moment because I want to. Now that you've talked about it, and now that we've talked about what Oklahoma City is doing, it reminds me a lot of what the Sixers did with the process, right? And I, for those listening at home, I put the process in air quotes because the Sixers and Sixers fans are not the ones that dubbed this the process. An ESPN reporter, and I apologize that I forget who it is. I used to remember off the top of my head, but it's been so long. I'm trying to move on from that era. Dubbed it the process in a piece where he interviewed Joel Embiid during that first season where he was injured. And I remember, Embiid embracing it. But the big thing, big thing in Philadelphia when we like to talk about the process and how we got to where we are right now is the league essentially interfered, inserting the Colangelos into the front office, making changes in the front office, forcing the Sixers to make some changes. A lot of decisions, and if you want to call it the process and you want to stick with that, and Sam Hinkie's process, and get high draft picks, and then trade him and go, trade whoever is worth value to get more picks until you find the guy. That process didn't get to be seen out because Hinkie got kind of interfered with the Colangelos. You go after, look at, for example, like a guy like Michael Carter Williams, right? Not necessarily a stud in the NBA, was taken with a high pick, wins the Rookie of the Year. They trade him for value right away. Jahlil Okafor, we didn't get the chance to make that trade because Colangelo was put into the front office. And then it really just, everything changed from that point. And then obviously the Elton Brand trying to come in and some poor roster building, trying to fit, two centers next to each other and then find a space for Ben Simmons somewhere in there as well. Ben Simmons not improving at all any year in his career, didn't help with that either. But it is really funny to see another team, and I'm sure that Oklahoma City isn't even the only one, but another team take a similar approach and no one has anything to say about it because, well, we're talking about it, but the league doesn't have anything to say about it because it doesn't have a nickname.
Right. And I think it's tough too because it's tough because I don't think that anyone can really get a read on what the end game is for Oklahoma City. With the Sixers, we kind of knew what they were trying to do. Obviously the end game for any team is to be good. But I don't know if we really know what the idea is for Oklahoma City. What does that mean? Does it mean that you have a starting five of entirely your own draft picks? Like, do you keep the picks? Are they trying to trade the picks for a star? Like the Knicks are? I don't really know what their what phase 2 is, and I don't think the league does either, which is why they're kind of taking it lightly in terms of stuff. Although I agree with you, it is getting out of hand at this point. I'm happy. I'm a Knicks fan, but I'm happy to see at least one other team try and do the same, if only so that it draws attention to the issue, because it's tough, and it's really hard to look at the fact that if a team like the Clippers collapse, or if a team like the Lakers suck, then guys like the Thunder and the New Orleans Pelicans all of a sudden are monsters because they decided to sell the farm. And I yeah, it's tough. And it's funny because I talked about the process on the first show that I produced here, and how you look at the trade chart, the way that you do with like the Kristaps Porzingis trade, and you look at who they chose. But this time you look at who they chose over who they didn't choose. I just G-chatted you. You mean you didn't like when Philly tanked for Markelle Fultz and then traded up for Jason Tatum to get him? The fact that I forget who said it, who showed it on Twitter from ESPN this year, but after the finals, somebody mentioned that almost every single piece of the Celtics starting five was or could have been at one point a Philadelphia 76er through the process, which is just insane. Yeah. I don't know what we do. I think that a lot of people right now are focused in on the issue of super teams, are focused in on the issue of guys deciding of tampering and guys deciding they want to play together and forcing the issue with the front offices. And I think that that's mostly because this is unlike baseball or football, much more a player-centric league. They have the political power in a way that football players and baseball players don't. So it's something that a lot more people can draw a lot more attention to here. But what people don't want to seem to talk about, and like you said, because it doesn't have a nickname, is the front office side of that, which is when you decide to have no gods, no masters, no loyalty to any player, and just finding a way to get as many draft picks as you can, and thus get as many good players on as little contract value as possible. It's it's an issue that I don't even know how they really fix, because I don't think that fixing the lottery odds helps either. Personally, as much as a fan of a bad team, I would begrudge it. I think that you do have to go back to either an entirely random draft. You have to go to something where like the top five picks are drawn by random weight, and then everything else is by record. Or you go to an NFL worst team gets the pick system. But I think the lottery is proving to be broken even when they try to fix it. So I don't really know where you go from here. I do think that Adam Silver is generally a good commissioner and can figure it out. That being said, it is a broken system for sure when we look at not only the Sixers of a few years ago, but now the Oklahoma City Thunder just abusing that system of trading away guys for picks.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, it does feel like a broken system at times, but really it's just because of how much impact one man can have in the NBA. And we'll get into it a little bit. I like this side tangent where we're going. We will get to Jets and Giants talk shortly. Before we continue with this talk, my name's Kyle Fisher. We got Jacob Gardner producing for us today. You'll hear his voice often throughout the show. You're listening to the Call Sports, home for ad-free, break-free, interruption-free New York sports talk. We're going national too, not just New York, but New York sports talk focused. You can listen in. We're talking Nets, talking some NBA drama. You can call in, text in, give us your thoughts. The number's 917-793-1717 if you want to join the conversation. Again, let us know your opinions. Join the conversation. My goal here is to have a fun, inclusive conversation as opposed to telling you why you might be wrong like a lot of folks on the radio might do. I'm not here to yell. I might talk a lot, but you won't hear me raise my voice unless it's just out of hype and it's out of excitement. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at The Call Sports, myself at Kyle Fisher 45 to get all your updates outside of the show. But again, give that number a call if you want to join the conversation. I think that it's very interesting. One thing that you mentioned about it feels like a broken system at times. And I agree. There's a lot of drama and issues going on. And I think it's because the players are so well marketed and they really do become their own businesses in the NBA and really become their own spokespersons. And it seems like the players in the NBA really figured that out earlier, right? Whether it's because Jordan laid the groundwork by starting the Jordan brand and really staying out of the union and really finding his own way to make money and build his brand, not only during his playing time, but beyond. Whether it's, LeBron figuring out where he wants to go and figuring out who he wants to bring with him, moving to LA so he can start his post-playing career ahead of time. There's a lot of things to talk about, but just to get back to the the broken system thing that we mentioned, right? Is it that the system has finally become broken, or is it that people just realize that that's how to play within the system, right? We talk about the Spurs tanking back in the day to get the big two in the middle. That tanking has been around for a long time, and whether the system is just being exploited differently now means that it's been something that could have been addressed for a long time. The Right now it feels broken because of how much people are taking advantage of it. You have guys telling their front office who they should trade, when they should trade picks and players. I don't know if it's always, has it always been broken and just teams are finally finding the right way to exploit it is the question. Is Sam Hinkie laying the modern day groundwork for how to do it as opposed to, unlocking some hidden secret of how to tank the right way?
Right. I think that I, as a fan, agree with you that this is the way to play the game. I'm not usually if you're not cheating, you're not trying guy. Because I like with hockey, I really kind of have it out for teams like Las Vegas right now, who are abusing that weird injury reserve salary cap situation in the postseason. I think that's very finicky is the word I'm going to use because it's a little more on air appropriate. But I think that
appreciate that.
I know my role here at the call. But I think that from a fan perspective, yes, I agree that I think that this is how you play it. I think it's fair. I don't know. I do think that the lottery odds need to be taking a look at, but I don't think that trying to trade your way into the lottery is inherently broken. But looking at it from a perspective of a league that more than any other sports association even in the world, I would say more than more than any other league tries to keep the play balanced, because we don't see Major League Baseball or FIFA or anyone like that have such an active hand in making sure that rosters are competitive enough. We see them make rule changes to the sport. We see them say, "Oh, we're going to ban the shift next year," which you can feel however you want about that. We can get into that later if you want. We see them say, "Oh, we're going to change concussion protocol so players don't get hurt as often," but we don't see commissioners saying, "No, I don't think Chris Paul should be allowed to play for the Lakers," or "I don't think that that's a whole situation." But we don't see that in other leagues, point blank. So I think that from the perspective of a league that is trying to be more active in the roster construction of their teams and treats each team kind of more like a piece of entertainment, whether you like it or not, then I think that you have to look at it and see that the system is broken, because I think that the last, how many other leagues are going to see the commissioner come out and basically say with nothing but bluntness, "Don't tank for Victor Wembanyama. Don't do it." I don't think that you'd ever see that from a Roger Goodell or a Robert Manfred. So I think it's interesting. It's a situation that they're going to have to look at for their, if only to say that they looked at it. But as a fan, I think that this is the way to go, especially for the teams like Oklahoma City or in other years, Sacramento, besides this year seemingly, that are just not attracting guys to come and play for them unless they are drafted there.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mentioned it right before I did the quick read. Excuse me. But the biggest difference, and the reason it might feel like this is a broken system, is because we know how much of an impact one player can have on a roster in the NBA as opposed to these other sports, right? The number one pick in Major League Baseball may never make it to the league or have any impact whatsoever. For Philly fans listening, cue the Mickey Moniak talk, right? The number one overall pick doesn't necessarily guarantee success in the major leagues. The number one pick, especially going quarterback, is about a 50-50, first round picks, but number one pick, not guaranteed to do well in the majors. I mean, you're better off picking, in the majors. In the NFL, you're better off picking a lineman than you are a quarterback or a skill position guy with a really early pick, just based on the amount of success. And again, what does that do for your roster? If your roster isn't built, that number one pick can only get you so far. You should use that number 1 pick to help build the roster and then find the skill position the skill position players later on. The big thing is, we've seen how many times has LeBron James taken his team, thrown them on his back, whether it was with Cleveland, whether it was, even the second time around in Cleveland when he was dealing with all the injuries. How many times did you see LeBron throw the team on his back and run them into the playoffs? Right?
And let's run some numbers on that too. The infamous no help graphic from that 2016 run. There was not a single player in that conference finals that had more than 11 points per game besides LeBron James. And they ended up winning that year, which is just insane. You don't see that in other sports, guys being able to singularly move the needle and make a team good when it was bad the year before.
And that's the key, right? Is it a broken system, or is it just that the players in the NBA can have so much more of an impact overall, right? Because, like you said, there's no talks about fixing tanking in the NFL. Tank for Tua was a big thing a couple years ago. There's definitely no talk of tanking for a specific player in baseball. There's really no guarantees when you're drafting high school players or guys who spent 2 years in JUCO, whatever the case is, right? It's all about the development. A few guys ended up being stars, but no one knew that Mike Trout was going to walk onto a field at 19 and be the best player in the world, right? Nobody knew that. Even Bryce Harper, who was heralded and put on the cover of Sports Illustrated and ESPN the magazine as a high schooler, who was heralded as the next great thing, well, he was outshadowed by Mike Trout pretty quickly. And it took him a few years to mature and really understand the game and how to be a major league player over a long summer like the MLB season has. Even in hockey, you can tank for a guy all you want, but if you don't have the depth and don't have the depth on the lines and don't have the development in your front office, then that 1 pick isn't going to make or break. Speaking as a Flyers fan, how many times have they been near the bottom? Yeah, exactly. How many times have we been near the bottom of the league and then those picks mean nothing because we can't do anything with them? That's the big difference. Is if you get the right guy in the NBA draft, your team can turn around from worst to near first like that. And that's why the system feels broken, but is it really broken? And that's not a question for me to answer. I know that I'm posing it as a question to you. It's more of a wondering, right? But it's not something that I have a true insight to. It's going to be for the league partners in the league to have conversations on about if the system is I don't even know what you could potentially do. Like you say, can you change the weighting? The end result's still going to be the same. If I trade away all my talent, bring guys onto the roster who aren't necessarily NBA ready, I essentially have a G League roster running out there every day, getting my butt kicked. Don't really care about butts in the seats this season or the next season. And then you just hope and pray that you get that crop of talent when you have those early picks. So it's interesting. It's an interesting take because, like you said, it does feel broken, but is it broken, or is it just a circumstance of the NBA being a league where one player can really change your franchise's fortune? All right. Well, we're going to come back. No, yeah, go for it. Go for
okay,
it.
I was just going to say, yeah, I 100% agree. I just think that, it is definitely a product of the product, as a way to put it. I think that you look at a guy, you mentioned LeBron James. We also look at guys like Victor Wembanyama, who looks like he can just go out and be a one-man team. You look at guys even like Ben Simmons, who I'm sure is a sore subject for you, who just through defense, yes, like how many point guards can guard the 1 through 5 like that? Not that he's so good at guarding against like he's not going to guard a Jokic, but he can still provide that for you for the Nets in a way that another point guard could not. I also look at guys like what Paolo Banchero. I'm a Duke fan. I grew up in North Carolina. Paolo Banchero can provide you. Zion Williamson can provide you when he's healthy. It's just like, I don't think that you can fix it in basketball, and it's kind of a good problem to have ultimately, because you have players who are just so dominant in the game that you just can't fix the fact that teams are going to want to be bad for a season in order to get those guys, especially looking at a team like the New York Knicks, who I'm a fan of. They don't need to care about putting butts in seats because butts are going to be in seats. You know that people are going to go buy your tickets, so it's not like you're losing money because you win 17 games one year.
Yeah, I agree. And we're going to come back to some basketball talk. I definitely want to talk to you about kind of this feeling in the league where, you know, it's the Mecca, but it's not the Knicks and it's not the aura that it used to be. So we'll get to that later in the show for sure. Just as a reminder, everybody, you're listening to Kyle Fisher. We got Jacob Gardner on the ones and twos. You're listening to the Call Sports. You're home for ad-free, interruption-free, break-free New York sports talk. Right now we're doing a little national talk, but we love talking New York sports here. We're going to switch to some Jets talk in a moment. And if you want to join the conversation, give us your thoughts or give us a little bit of input on what we talked about already today. Give us a call, give us a text. The number's 917-793-1717. Again, check us out on Twitter at The Call Sports. Make sure you're following the station and give me a follow on Twitter to tell me what I got wrong. If you want to disagree, we'll have a fun conversation on there at Kyle Fisher 45. All right, so let's switch gears now. Let's hop over. And you said you already told the folks, I'm sure that folks who listen daily already know, but you're telling my audience you're a Jets fan. So I want to get started with some Jets talk.
Sounds good.
And we had an interesting conversation last week. We had a caller calling about the Jets. And I want to get into what they talked about in a little bit. But before we do that, I want to give a little bit of a preview, right? May not be the full injury report, but injuries are starting to pile up for the Jets, right? 2-2. To some folks, that may even be surprising, especially when Joe Flacco was running things under center for a few games there. Wilson comes back last week and looks good. 10 players total on the injury report right now, including some who are already out for the season, so may not be on the weekly released injury report, but still count. And one of the biggest challenges for the Jets this year, it seemed, has been offensive line and the health around the offensive line. 5 of the 10 players on the list are offensive linemen. 3 are out indefinitely. 1 player on the IR. We have another player. I think Dwayne Brown's questionable, but leaning towards playing this weekend. 5 players out, 2 questionable. One of the players listed is Wilson, just because they gave him a break in practice this week, but he's likely to play it as well. Again, Dwayne Brown full go in practice earlier this week, likely going to be inserted back in that left tackle spot. 3rd place in the division, and I talked a little bit last week, Jacob, about how it really did feel, and then, Wilson comes back and makes me eat some of my words, but it really did feel like, the Patriots lose Tom Brady. Mac Jones doesn't look like the guy immediately. They stumble out of the gate in this new era where Bill's trying to prove that it's more him than Tom, which I think we have that answer already. But the division, for the first time in a long time, felt like it was open, felt like it was up for grabs. And because the Jets didn't necessarily do the right things leading up to that opening, whereas maybe the Dolphins have, or at least in the last few years have, and then the Bills, we see what they've done. They've developed Josh Allen into a weapon. They're getting the running game going with unique rushing attacks from the offensive line, unique looks from the line. They go out and get a Stephon Diggs. Those 2 teams have started to step up, and the Jets kind of felt like little brother again. And I know I'm using that reference again, but they kind of felt like second fiddle in that division once again. But here they are, 2-2. 3rd place with a chance to go 3-2 for the first time, I think, since 2017? Maybe even further back than that. I have it further back than that. In my notes, but I have it written in my notes. Let me go find it real quick. Where is it? First time since. We'll find it. Feel free to correct me on Twitter and yell at me for not having it in front of me. But it's been an odd season, right? They're 2-2. And looking at the 2 games that they won, 2 big comeback wins, they could easily be 0-4. Some brutal miscues in the losses. They could easily be 3-1 without some of those missteps and miscues. So it really has been a confusing season. Our caller called last week and said, who would you rather be? The Jets or the Giants? 2 struggling teams. Giants now sitting at 3-1. Jets now sitting at 2-2. But if I'm looking at the way that the roster is built, I would rather be the Jets. The caller put it a great way. He said, if I'm looking at, Barkley's leading the league in rushing, we know that, but he may not be there much longer. He's had an injury history. Daniel Jones, one of the few quarterbacks who doesn't get his 5th-year option picked up. They put it a funny way. New York guy, he says, I don't want to He's like, I'm not buying a jersey if I'm a Giants fan. I'm not buying anybody's jersey. But you got guys like Sauce Gardner, like Garrett Wilson, like Hall. You have these young guys who look like they're panning out already. And it's exciting to watch the Jets for the first time in a long time, even if they're still in third place.
Yeah, I think to the caller's point, first, I'm going to address that. I agree that I would rather be the Jets. And it's for one reason, really. It's for one reason only, and that's the quarterback situation. I think that Daniel Jones has stepped up a lot this year. I'm going to give him that. I definitely went into the season as a New York sports person thinking that this was going to be the year that they moved away from him, but they look comfortable with him being there. That being said, today's league is so quarterback centric. You do not win in this league unless you have a quarterback under center that can not only organize the offense, but to an extent be the offense. You look at guys like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen for that, who can just put the game on their back. But I think that Daniel Jones, as someone who's familiar with what this looks like, fills more of that Mark Sanchez role on this Giants team. That's the comparison I'm going to make in terms of being a guy who can organize the offense. He's not bad at that, but cannot be the offense. Has to, and it shows in the Giants passing numbers this year. And I'll give them this too. Their receiving core is not what you want. You are not paying Kenny Golladay $72 million or however much they're paying him for what they're getting out of him right now, which is nothing. He's not even joining the team in London. And I think that you look at it, and I just don't know how much I envy them when it looks like they are primed to go out in the free agency period and find a guy to replace him. That being said, if you're the Jets, I don't think that you envy the situation, like you said, at the offensive line at all. And a lot of these wins are coming by the skin of your teeth. I think that the only thing you can really rest your hat on right now and be like, yes, the Jets finally made a good decision, is in drafting the defense of the past with the Joe Douglas regime. Yeah. You look at guys like Sauce Gardner's the talk of the town. You look at guys like LaMarcus Joyner. You look at guys that you just added and what an impact they're making already. These linebackers look fast this year. That's something that I've taken away for sure. But the fact that Sauce Gardner has lived up to the hype, he didn't give up a touchdown in college. We know this. But to me as a Jets fan, I had to look at it and say, yeah, well, it's the Jets, so we'll see how long that goes. But he's lived up to the hype. He's been exactly what he was advertised to be. And I think that you have to be excited. I don't want to get caught up in the Darrelle Revis comparison that a lot of people bring up. I just don't want to be that guy, but I do think that you have to be excited for the defensive side of this ball. That being said, the offense still is lacking direction from before Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh's time. You look at last season, and frankly, it's losing the direction that it had last season. Last season, you looked at some of the offensive play calling, and the one word, although it wasn't always effective, that you can come up with is creative. They came up with these really strange schemes at times, and at worst, that at least throws off the defense in terms of what they're looking for. But I'm seeing a lot more traditionalist play this season. I understand part of that is because we've seen Joe Flacco up until this point. You hope that they can get back on track, but it's hard to be creative with Zach Wilson when the offensive line is down to practice squad players already. And the real disappointment that I look towards is Mekhi Becton, because I think I think that's just you when he was healthy, he was on top of the world. He was holding back two guys with relative ease. He looked like the Mountain from Game of Thrones. It was just crazy. But he has been so healthy so little of the time that it's really tough to look at it and think that he's the left tackle of the future, especially when you look at the contributions of a guy like Elijah Vera-Tucker and think this is exactly what we were looking for out of this guy a season ago. It's tough. But I want to point out too that it's just to finalize why I'd rather be the Jets than the Giants, that the Mekhi Becton situation is less of a product of bad drafting and more of a product of bad circumstance, which is more than you can say about the Jets in years past. The Jets passed up on Dan Marino and Jerry Rice, you know? This is the team that did that. but they picked the right guy seemingly with Mekhi Becton. He just can't stay healthy. And you can point at the training staff for that. You can point at the medical staff over at MetLife for that. But you can't point at Joe Douglas for drafting the guy and then he didn't pan out, because it's not like he's not talented. He's just not healthy. So I think overall, I'd rather be the Jets because I'm not left with Daniel Jones. I think Zach Wilson has the higher ceiling, but I'm also not left with the mess that Mike Maccagnan left. And I think that this team, while at a slower pace than people want to admit or want to see, is improving.
I agree. And I mean, you're in a tough division, right? Miami finally started to figure some things out. They went out and spent money. Tua, before the concussion issues, looked like the guy that they were hoping he was going to be when they took him. Josh Allen went from one of the worst graded quarterbacks to one of the best, seemingly overnight. It's a tough division. And, Bill's still going to be Bill. So you can never really count the Patriots out, even if things aren't moving the way that they should right now. You can't count them out until they're down and out for a couple years, in my opinion, just because of the way that he's built and done kind of so much with so little over the years. One thing I want to get into with the Jets, and we talked about the importance of the O-line, right? Wilson was under so much pressure last week. And Elijah Vera Tucker, that man has been Mr. Reliable on that line. He's played started at three different positions along the line, likely moving. He was left tackle last week, likely switching back over to right guard or right tackle if Dwayne Brown stays healthy and is ready to go for this weekend. He's been great despite him being under a lot of pressure. He'll probably move around. I'm surprised you didn't mention, and please correct my pronunciation as a Jets fan. I've only seen his name on paper, haven't watched a lot of Jets this year. Laken Tomlinson?
Yeah, Lincoln Tomlinson, like the president.
Laken. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Thank you. So he has. I'm surprised you didn't mention him as one of the bigger disappointments so far this season. He's spent a lot of time. He was a former Pro Bowler. You mentioned being a Duke, being North Carolina. He's a former Duke guy. I feel like he needs to improve for them to have any hope. To get Hall going, to keep additional protection along the line for Wilson. 3 years, $40 million. Not a crazy price tag for some offensive line depth, but still somebody who is important for the success. If he's going to be healthy, one of the few healthy guys, he's going to need to step up. Pro Football Focus gives out their grades. For a run blocking grade, he has the worst grade of all offensive line guards graded so far this season, all 91 of them, with a 30.7. So that is, again, I wouldn't say that on paper prior to the season that was money poorly spent. You went out and got the Niners were known to have a good offensive line. He was a former Pro Bowler over there, but it hasn't worked out the way that you would hope. And again, like you said, it's not necessarily money poorly spent. It's just results not showing. And with all their injury issues that they have on the line, he's a guy who's going to need to step up sooner rather than later.
Yeah, 100%. You also look at the contributions of Carl Lawson, which are not as egregious, but also money well spent that did not deliver. So far, he missed that entire season, which, again, it's another situation of you spent the right money, you got the right guy, you just didn't get the performance you needed out of him. And it's a tough situation to be in, too, because until and the other guy, too, that I look to with that is C.J. Uzomah, who the Jets were talking all offseason about how they were going to run this 2 tight end offense, and how much have you really seen it yet? With Tyler Conklin too, it's really hard to gauge the success of a guy like Joe Douglas as a GM when he's making all these moves and then they're executed well, the moves, but then the follow through is what you miss out on, because it's all such statistical anomalies, right? It's all such, like, you could not expect what is going to happen ever. And I don't really think that you can you can't in good faith call for Joe Douglas's head when he masterminded that Seattle deal, for Jamal Adams. He's going to be able to hang his hat on that for the rest of his GMing career. and I'm still in love with what that became. But I think that you can't look at it in good faith and say whether or not this regime has been a success or failure, even though this is really the hot seat year for a lot of people. This is the year where they're looking at it and saying this is going to determine Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas's future here in New York. You look at all of that, and there's no way to be conclusive about it, because every time they make the right move, something inexplicable happens. And I don't know if you really can move on from them, especially when you look at the New York Jets and say that they're in the same boat. But you look at how Tyreek Hill reacted to being with the Jets. That's the general perception of the league, seemingly. With the why would I want to go play for the New York Jets?
Jets gonna Jets, just like
Jets gonna
Mets,
Jets.
right?
Yeah. Why would I want to go play for the Jets? They suck, and they're not. And they don't know how to manage a team. It's hard to get that bad taste out of players' mouths until you build a culture. But it's hard to build a culture around guys when they're the right guys, but they play the wrong way. I mean, and to push it back even further, you look at their luck with guys like Le'Veon Bell. Why? Who had any reason to believe that Le'Veon Bell was going to be the way he was when he was a Jet? Now he's boxing. Like it's just it's it's really hard to wrap your head around how they get these things wrong, because or like where they go from here, because there's no reason to believe that these are going to be the wrong moves.
I agree. Real quick, we're going to, just to remind the folks, you're listening to Kyle Fisher. We're going to be on, excuse me, myself and Jacob will be on until 6 o'clock. You're listening to the Call Sports, your home for ad-free, break-free, interruption-free New York sports talk. We're talking some Jets football right now. If you want to join the conversation, give us a call, give us a text, 917-793-1717. Make sure you're following this station on Twitter at the Call Sports. Give me a follow on Twitter at Kyle Fisher 45. Tell me why you disagree. If you join the conversation, I promise it won't be blow you off. We enjoy having fun. We enjoy having the conversations about sports. That's why we're all here. Sports are fun. Let's have some fun talking about it. Again, the number 917-793-1717. Quick check-in before we go back to Jets talk. For all you Yankee fans, Tampa Bay and Cleveland now in the 12th. De Los Santos, former Philadelphia Philly, on the mound now for the Guardians. Arozarena up to lead off the 12th inning. The Miles Straw added 1 hit. Now 4 hits for the Guardians. Only 2 hits for Tampa Bay. Scoreless starting off the 12th inning. Okay, let's head back over to Jets talk. And I agree with you. I don't think that this season should be a hot seat season for Saleh and Joe Douglas. You see what they've been able to do. They were in the running for Tyreek Hill. I know that obviously he didn't choose here, right? But he said recently, he said this week, it was close. And, to play in New York, I know that he's a young guy and Miami's a party atmosphere, but New York has that cachet. People want to be in New York. I don't care that it's cold in the winter. People want to be in New York. It has cachet. It might not have the name value of the Giants. We know that their struggles, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the Jets were right in it. And I don't think this should be a hot seat season for these guys. It really does seem a little premature. I know that everybody is in a rush to get to the hot seat, to get to the new guy if it's not working. But you've started to see the dividends of what these rookies this year have done in Sauce and Hall and Wilson. Coming into this week's matchup against the Dolphins, it's an important matchup for them, especially if the talk is hot seat, whether that's just fan talk or legit rumors from reporters. I think probably remains to be seen. It's when that talk lasts all season long and reporters are talking about it more and more instead of just guys who have a microphone in front of them talking about it like you and I. When reporters are reporting that these talks are happening or that there's concern inside the building that it may be the end of the run, that's when you really get into it. And I think that one of the big things in the NFL is, I've noticed at least, is that, and I mean, I say that like I'm the only one who noticed it. No, it seems to be a pretty common theme, is that guys, whether it be quarterbacks, whether it be general managers, whether it be coaches, aren't given enough of a leash. This league is not a league where you can turn around overnight. If you have a solid foundation and things aren't working out, yes, you can potentially make a surprise run to the playoffs next year. We know how much turnover there are on playoff teams season to season. But it's not something where if you're struggling and if you're in the basement and say the Jets fall off the table completely the rest of the way and end up near the bottom of the league, it's not like a new regime is suddenly going to be able to turn that around. They're going to need a few years to really build this thing out, and you're seeing them build the foundation, right? We talked about the moves that they made on the defensive line. We talk about the moves that they made on the offensive line. Just because these guys are hurt doesn't mean that when everybody's healthy that it won't pay off. You look at a team like the Philadelphia Eagles. They have built this team around the offensive and defensive lines, and they've been able to plug and play. Yes, they have key players, right? They go out and get an AJ Brown. They have Miles Sanders in the backfield, but they've been able to battle through injuries because their lines have been solid. And the key is that they've been healthy. After that Super Bowl run, they had kind of a down season because the offensive line wasn't healthy. And then you continue to replenish the line through the draft, through key signings, through trades. Those guys get healthy, and all of a sudden they're starting to look like that same line that got them their first Super Bowl title to start. So going back to the Jets matchup, we know that they have the Dolphins this weekend. Very important matchup. Divisional matchups have been a struggle for the Jets. They are 0 for their last 12 in games against the AFC East. Not looking good. I talked about, are they going to be the team to step up and kind of fill that void left by the Patriots? When you're 0-12 against the division, that's not the way to get it done. They may not have Tua. We know what happened there, and we went into the details about the concussion last week and how that was handled. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but Jacob, if you do want to visit it with the new audience, we can in a moment. But let's get through the matchups. Tua might not be there, but Brissett showed some competence, especially with those speedy receivers. The secondary for the Jets has been strong so far this season, but this is easily the toughest matchup that they're going to have with Hill and Waddle going against it. Waddle, I know that he's questionable right now. We'll see if he ends up playing, but those two guys look like studs. The Dolphins may end up running the ball more despite having those options with the Jets' improved secondary. I think we talked about DJ Reed, Jordan Whitehead, Sauce Gardner tied for fifth with with 5 pass breakups so far this season. Still looking for that first pick, but people are starting to avoid that guy already. You want to talk about how defense wins championships and giving Wilson the time to develop, even if he hasn't been able to develop because he's facing a lot of pressure and he started the year injured. Giving that guy time to develop is going to be key. And if you build through the line like they're trying to do, if you build through the defense, Gardner is already getting less attention because quarterbacks are afraid to throw his way. That's one of the reasons he doesn't have any takeaways so far this season, is because they're avoiding throwing to him. And we'll be able to measure up what kind of impact Gardner is going to have when facing off against either Hill or Waddle this weekend.
Right. I think that's the big that's the big headliner takeaway for me this game is not only are we going to we're going to really get a good test of what this defense can be, because we're going up against guys like Hill and Waddle. We're going to see what we are able to bring against some of the league's top receivers. Something that I don't think we were able to say with Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett last week. But I think that the other takeaway too is that, man, did the Jets potentially get a break in having to face Teddy Bridgewater this week? I think. I
completely agree.
I think that in any other circumstance, with Tua being the starter, I would have called this game a wash. I would have just not tuned in tomorrow. I would have focused on my Rangers preseason tonight and my Knicks preseason the day after. I would have known what I was getting into. But I think that right now we're looking at a situation where the Jets, who are building around their defense, and that's really the successful half of the ball that we're seeing this season, are really getting a chance to flex that muscle and thus give Zach Wilson that time to develop, both in the long term but also in this game. He's going to have a lot more opportunities to succeed against this team if the defense can step up and show that they really are what they are being hyped up to be. That's really the tail of the tape for me, is that Sauce Gardner, LaMarcus Joyner, Carl Lawson, guys like that this is their day to shine, both in terms of challenge, but also in terms of having the advantage over not playing Tua. So it's going to be up to Zach Wilson to kind of put up or shut up, show that he can be clutch, not just in the last little bit of the fourth quarter, and show that he can take advantage of being on the field for that much longer potentially, and showing some some focus, showing some control in terms of these drives.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it may seem like and I agree with you that it is an advantage not having to face Tua. Tua has looked like a monster to start this year. You talked about guys who, the league is kind of moving in a direction where we weren't sure, right? It used to be, I want that pocket passer. I want it's why Jared Goff got drafted so high. It's Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Eli Manning running the show for so long, and Ben Roethlisberger, who had the ability to move, but really flourished throwing the ball as well. Teddy is more like Tua. Obviously, he's not what Tua was this season or the potential that Tua has shown, but 14 for 23, completing 60% of his passes last week, 193 yards, one touchdown, one interception. But he can get the ball down the field. 64-yard pass last week. He's not anything to bat an eye at. I'll say I think coming into the season, he was known as one of the best potential backups in the league. I think that the Dolphins didn't know what they were going to get from Tua as opposed when it comes to development and when it comes to overall health. And then you see what he showed this year. Tua is one of those guys, like you mentioned, it used to be one of these statuesque guys in the backfield running the show. But Tua was a guy who can be the offense. And I don't know if Teddy is quite at that level. Your top quarterbacks, you're looking at like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Tua so far this year at least, Jalen Hurts so far this year at least, really developing into guys who can be the offense when needed. And then on top of that, having the weapons around them being very key. Looking at something that you hinted at quickly with Wilson being readily available, being strong throughout the entire game. Jets, I found this stat interesting. Jets have scored 40 of their points this season in the final 2 minutes of either the first half or the end of the game. Now, 2-minute drives are incredible. If you have that 2-minute offense grooving, you can be successful. It's one of the reasons they were able to have those comebacks. The key is going to be, can he get it done the rest of the game, right? Especially when you're facing a team that even without Tua can be a high-powered offense. Hill leading the league in receiving yards so far this season. Waddle, if healthy, a fantasy stud at least. Someone who has him in multiple leagues could potentially tell you about that, aka me. But having those guys for someone like Bridgewater to step in only keeps the likelihood of the Dolphins making this a competitive game more, even greater. And I think that one thing I liked that you said is you were going to call it a wash, and now all of a sudden it's an interesting game. And I think that brings some cachet to the game. It brings some cachet to Jets fans. They're more excited for this game than ever. You hate to see someone get hurt, especially the way that he was hurt. From my perspective, in all sports, not just football, not just when talking about my team, I don't like to see guys get hurt. Nobody does, right? But I've never been a guy who celebrates, oh, dude, it sucks that dude's hurt, but it helps my team. I want to see good guys play sports. I want to see the best of the best playing every single week. So it stinks, but from a fan perspective, you got to be more tuned up for this game than you would have been otherwise.
I think that's
the big
key
thing.
too.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. That's the key too.
No,
I'm never that guy either. I don't wish any ill will against Tua, especially considering the nature of the injury and the nature that it was handled, which was a whole situation, as you mentioned earlier. But I think that you do have to look at it and say that the fact of the matter is the defense caught a huge break. In that, I do think it changes the tide of this game, or at least makes it competitive. I think that the Dolphins have looked like such a monstrous team on offense with the way that Tua has connected with Waddle and Tyreek Hill, that to not have your primary signal caller under center, even though Teddy Bridgewater is a formidable backup, we knew that from when he was on the Jets. I personally, and this is how I know that maybe I'm okay at talking about sports, I remember when Sam Darnold got drafted originally, and I said, well, maybe I like what I'm seeing from him in camp, but I think Teddy Bridgewater should be there just in case, be under center, just to give him that extra year. And look where we are now. But Teddy Bridgewater, obviously a very enviable backup for a lot of teams. So yes, while you're still getting a capable quarterback, you're not getting one of the guys who might be by the end of this year a top quarterback in this league.
I agree, and it's a big sigh of relief for Jets fans. Guys, we just hit the 4 o'clock hour. Please, if you've been sticking with us, stick with us. We got 2 more hours left. You're listening to the Call Sports Radio, your home for ad-free, break-free, interruption-free New York sports talk. My name is Kyle Fisher. We got Jacob Gardner behind the dish. We're talking about Jets football. We're going to get into Giants football in a little bit.